Welcome to the Bureau. I'm Eivor of Alamut, and today we're going to be talking about the yet-to-be-released Assassin's Creed Shadows. We'll be going over things we know, things I'd personally like to see, and maybe even making some theories. We'll see about that last one. With that out of the way, sit back, relax, and let's jump into the Animus. I feel like this may be the most gamer-like video I do, though I won't be complaining about dumb things or saying slurs. If you're new to the channel, I'm Eivor. I've been a fan of the Assassin's Creed series since 2009, Assassin's Creed 2 being my first Assassin's Creed game. And ever since then, I've been obsessed. It's my favorite thing ever. Clearly. Today I thought we'd have some fun combing through what we know about Shadows and maybe try to pick apart the story trailer. I was going to talk about what I'd like to see, but doing this all from the perspective of a longtime fan of the franchise. I mean, there's already enough negativity and racist remarks surrounding the game. Which is gross. So let's get into the basics. Assassin's Creed Shadows takes place in feudal Japan during the Warring States period. We have two protagonists, Naoe, who is a shinobi, meaning she is our stealth character. Then we get to play as the real historical figure Yasuke, who is a samurai, meaning he is our brawler type character. This dual protagonist setup being reminiscent of Syndicate in a way. I mean, there was some overlap in skills with Jacob and Evie. Jacob could stealth, Evie could brawl, so I'd say Naoe and Yasuke are more extreme in their roles. Now, Japan has been a long time requested setting for the Assassin's Creed series, for obvious reasons. People wanted ninja assassins, though as I understand, ninja is just the Chinese reading of the Japanese characters for shinobi, so shinobi would be more accurate. But still, before Shadows came out, people wanted ninja assassins. You know, even though the assassins of the series are based off of the actual assassins of history, the Assassins from the Middle East, with bases in places like Alamut in Persia and Masyaf in Syria. Those are real-life fortresses that actually existed. But no, to some, ninjas were the OG assassins. I say this because this is based off of a real-life conversation I had with a guy, and for those who haven't seen my first video, I'll retell it quickly for context. Basically, I got into a conversation about Assassin's Creed with a guy, and at one point he was saying how he wanted Japan as a setting for the series, because according to him, ninjas were the OG assassins. To which I got to actually him, and explain how the Assassins were the actual OG assassins of history. It's what the franchise is based off of. You know, the first Assassin's Creed? Obviously, he was not happy with my answer, but this would probably be the best time to get into my sort of bias, I guess you could say. I want to build my channel by being honest with you about my opinions, meaning I have to be honest right now and say, I honestly never wanted the Japan setting for Assassin's Creed. I thought a shinobi assassin would be too on the nose. I found the Japan setting to be really played out. I feel like we see samurais all the time. But, of course, I do live in America where weebs are rampant, so maybe that's why the idea of the setting just kind of exhausted me. Jokes aside, I do have a bias against the setting. It's just not for me. Well, then again, neither was Victorian England, but I still absolutely love Syndicate, so you never know. But I know this was a big want for people, so I am genuinely happy for those fans. I mean, I got two of my dream settings. First with Valhalla, as I really wanted a Norse Assassin's Creed, and then after that, I wanted to return to the Middle East, and literally the next game was Mirage. I won twice in a row, so I can take a step back and let people have this. Well, then why bring this up at all? Well, I have apprehensions about Shadows, and I think these apprehensions stem from my own bias. For the first time, I'm worried. I'm worried that an Assassin's Creed game will be something else than Assassin's Creed. And I honestly hate this feeling. Like, I desperately want to be wrong about this, because I am the person that will defend the Layla trilogy for all being good Assassin's Creed games. Which, yes, includes Odyssey, which I would argue is the most black sheep game of the series. I see the Assassin's Creed series more as the story of humanity. I mean, the first Assassin's Creed started as Patrice Désilets wanting to tell a story from a moment of human history. Assassins, Templars, Hidden Ones, Order of Ancients, they're all just frameworks showing persisting ideas within humanity to show how we are cyclical creatures by nature. All this to say, looking at Shadows is the very first time I've stared at the game going, where are the assassins in my creed? And again, I think this just stems from me not really caring about Japan as a setting. Though admittedly, I am terribly fascinated by Yasuke as a character for the setting. I'm actually excited to learn his story and how they portray his character. We don't know a lot about him other than he was real and he was, in fact, a samurai. So the devs have plenty of room to play around. I have played all the Assassin's Creed games in stealth mode. Yes, even Odyssey and Valhalla. But this may be the first time I go in guns blazing and play more of the combat character. Yasuke just seems genuinely more interesting than Naoe. Well, at least to me. The game isn't out yet, so things are subject to change. That is a good reminder though. The game is not out yet, so we'll have to wait and see for a lot of things. Most importantly, the story. But still, I think it'd be fun to look at what Ubisoft has put out and just talk about what we could see. Without going crazy over the top with speculation, of course. This is just for fun, so let's get analyzing. Ubisoft has put out some basically articles going over some upcoming things in Shadows. We have world exploration, stealth, parkour, and combat gameplay. We'll first be looking at the world exploration one. Before I start, there's just something I have to mention. I wasn't sure how to bring it up prior, but the marketing for Shadows has been kind of odd. Not that I'm a fan of the marketing team anyway, but still. The way stuff is phrased, or the way they act like some of this is just new, is just, well, hopefully you see what I mean. It just puts a weird taste in my mouth, which is why I feel the need to mention it. But with that out of the way, the first thing talked about is the world map, which really isn't anything new or special to talk about. Same thing we've had, really. Same thing with the viewpoints. Viewpoints haven't really changed. They say that now viewpoints don't unlock portions of the map. Rather, it just unlocks points of interest. Basically, they just remove one of the functions of the viewpoints. They've always shown points of interest. See, this is where we see inklings of that weird marketing I mentioned. When on top of a viewpoint in Shadows, you're able to see points of interest near you, which is something we've had in the past couple titles. Valhalla is a good example of this mechanic. If anything, the Shadows one looks a bit more like a refined version of it. Well, then we get into a part that I personally find worded kind of weird. Saying that longtime fans would be pleased to know that along with the new manual camera, that from what I can tell isn't new, the iconic synchronization camera will return. To which I ask, well, where did it go? It never left? Or are you just saying it's still here and isn't going anywhere? It's just weird wording to me, like I said. What's interesting though is that some viewpoints are going to be in enemy-controlled areas, and Yasuke may have to find a different way to reach the viewpoints. So to me, the new and fun part of the viewpoints is talked about a lot less than the stuff we've already had for viewpoints. So there's that. Next, we're basically just reminded that we have no eagle anymore, which kind of bums me out, but I get it. The clip in this section of the article shows Naoe looking for a target on a rooftop, and then the camera snap zooms to the target, which I just find kind of jarring and odd, but this may change before the game's release. Next is safe houses, which I do want to take a brief moment to talk about. The safe house, or kakurega, are going to be small extensions of your home base. I imagine that the home base might be something similar to Ravensthorpe, as they describe it as being fully customizable, which is cool. So the kakurega are going to be extensions of this home base. And this will be the one nitpick you'll hear from me. These safe houses, as described right now, sound an awful lot like bureaus. For those who have seen my Mirage or my Assassin's Creed 2007 video, know what I'm going to say, but I love the bureaus. I think they're so uniquely Assassin's Creed, and I always get so jazzed when there is a return.
So I'm very curious as to why these are referenced as bureaus. This is really my only takeaway for this section, just a nagging curiosity of what the story could unveil. You have the Pathfinder, which is nothing new, just the same thing brought over from newer titles. Next is the objective board making a return from Mirage. The article explaining how you'll have to investigate your targets, which has been a thing since like Odyssey, but still, very good to hear. What's really interesting though when it comes to new things is scouts. They can gather resources, scout locations, and even reset alerts on you. This mechanic feels so interesting because it sort of reminds me of mechanics in Brotherhood, Revelations, Assassin's Creed 3, where you would send out your assassins to do missions. The scouts seem to be the next evolution of this, which leaves me admittedly a little bummed we didn't get this mechanic already with assassins or hidden ones. But again, maybe at some point these scouts will become assassin informants, but it's another waiting game with this one. I am so interested in the side content of the world. What will be around every corner for us to explore? What small activities are there for us, the player, to do? I mean, they're keeping it all pretty hush, which is fine by me. I love exploring these games, so that's going to be fun no matter the setting. For the next couple sections, I'm only going over the articles put out by Ubisoft. I know I could go over gameplay videos people have put out, but there's been quite a few and not all of them positive. I've toyed with the idea of looking through the gameplay videos, but I feel like the articles Ubisoft put out are basically the information that would have been in these gameplay videos. And to be a mix of honest and selfish, it saves me at least a little bit of time. Well, between work and then tinkering on other stuff in the background for future videos, I rather have succinct overviews that I can comb through. Plus, I honestly never look at a lot of gameplay videos before a new Assassin's Creed game. I like being surprised, well, as much as I can be. I only ever look at trailers Ubisoft puts out and then wait and discover things for myself. Hopefully that helps you understand my choices. With that out of the way, let's see if there's anything interesting to look into with the parkour. Starting off, the parkour article explains how they switch the dodge and crouch buttons, to which I have yet to fully understand the reasoning. Maybe it makes sense with the Shadows gameplay, perhaps it just has a better feel. As of right now, it just stands as sort of an odd choice to me. Not bad though. The bulk of the parkour information is just explaining things most players would already know. Arguably, over-explaining. Did we really need it explained to us that Naue can climb and descend? I don't think we did, but here we are. Skipping ahead is where some of the more interesting stuff comes in though. The sprint dodge seems to be a more embellished version of the roll dodge. It seems like basically the same mechanic, just Naue can use it to jump over short obstacles. I think the parkour section is pretty straightforward. And really the most exciting part about it is the grappling hook. Buildings in Japan aren't going to be the easiest to climb. A lot of overhanging roofs and what have you. So it makes sense to give the players something to combat this. But I really like how versatile the grappling hook is. You can use it as a hook swing to get over gaps. You can use the grappling hook to climb up even unclimbable surfaces by launching it at the apex of your wall run. Speaking of unclimbable surfaces, this too is making a comeback. Something we saw return to with Mirage, which is cool to see. But in my opinion, the parkour article is pretty straightforward. Nothing here to really dissect. I feel like I've just been sitting here going, that's cool. So let's just move on. Now, let's look at the combat. It starts with stuff that doesn't need much discussion, your simple light and heavy attacks. I really don't think we need to pick this apart, but what comes next is new, in a way. While in the Layla trilogy you could hold down the heavy attack for what is called an overpowered attack, Shadows is introducing something similar in the way of posture attacks. This time you can also hold down light attacks. It seems posture attacks are going to be mostly used for setting up combos. What's interesting is that it says enemies will be watching for posture attacks to keep you from charging them, so these aren't just free moves to land. There's basic defense, again nothing crazy, But to briefly go over the parrying, I really like how each character has a separate response to doing the move. Yasuke holds his ground and isn't able to be easily moved, and on a successful parry, can get the upper hand in a fight. While Naoe's parry is simply referred to as a deflect. When she deflects an incoming attack, Naoe pivots herself around the enemy, but this will also leave her exposed to any other enemies around her, keeping you, the player, on your toes. I really like this attention to detail, keeping those differences in the characters. I really like seeing the different playstyles fleshed out in every aspect of the game. Next is skills and abilities. We had this system in Valhalla. Active abilities that do a lot of damage in fights, or can be used even for tools for stealth. Then there's the passive skills that work in the background. They do an assortment of things, like boosting your base health. I actually really liked this system. It was fun to mix and match different abilities. I liked progressing through the skill tree and picking up passive skills I deemed important. It felt like I was customizing my playstyle in a way. Well, up until I maxed out the whole skill tree. But still, the abilities in Valhalla were mostly realistic. Give or take a couple of them that you didn't need to use. So the abilities weren't as off the wall as the ones in Odyssey. But then again, the abilities in Odyssey were only like that because Cassandra literally had a piece of Eden. I feel like I'm getting off track. I'm just trying to say I'm happy to hear the skills and ability combo is back. I feel like this is going to give a good variation to people's experience with the game. I'm excited to see what combos I can pull off, and how reminiscent this will be of Valhalla's combat. Well, only saying this because Valhalla has my favorite combat gameplay in the series, so anything building off of that is a win in my book. Having two protagonists means that we have a variety of weapons that we get to play with. Both Yasuke and Naoe get their own weapons to pick and play from. I'm excited to get into this section, so let's just get going. Let's look at Naoe's weapons first, getting the obvious one out of the way with the katana, and it is certainly a sword. Okay. I just find katanas very boring at this point. And again, I just feel like there's an oversaturation of them, even living here in America. But of course, we need katanas for shadows. It would be weird if we didn't have katanas. But we all know about the katana, so let's talk about the kusarigama. The kusarigama was first created in the Muromachi period and is a sickle, ball, and chain combo, said to be Naoe's best weapon for crowd control. There seems to be at least 3 types of kusarigama, and it's all dependent on where the chain is attached to the sickle. Naoe's seems to be a sickle with a chain attached to the base of the handle of the sickle. Most likely this weapon was used by swinging the chain above one's head, which Naoe does, then using the chain to entangle the opponent's spear, sword, or whatever weapon, or even immobilizing their arms or legs, this allowing the user to easily rush in and use the blade. I am not expecting Naoe's gameplay to be one-to-one with this. Gameplay is going to differ for as simple as making sure it's fun to play. But it's cool to see she's at least swinging the chain above her head. This movement is probably why the weapon wasn't used on the battlefield in mass combat. Plus, it wouldn't be the most useful against armor. The kusarigama would be best used in a one-to-one fight, and most useful against an opponent with a sword. Longer weapons not so much. Perhaps it was mostly used as a backup weapon. It's a perfect weapon for Naoe though, as it was used by shinobi. It was also used by female samurai known as bushi, which I just thought was a neat little fact to include. Next is the Tanto dagger, which in combat is paired with Naoe's hidden blade, and I'd like to sidestep for a moment and talk about the hidden blade. This is gonna kinda take us back to that weird marketing I mentioned, but Naoe's hidden blade is a really cool design. In fact, it almost looks like a Tanto blade itself. The fact that the blade can be rotated 90 degrees helps achieve this look. But there's just a small little detail. Back when they first dropped what Naoe's hidden blade looked like, they showed off that turn it does, then proceeded to say it was new. Which is just wrong. Connor's hidden blade also does this. I don't know if this was a weird mistake, like maybe they meant new lore-wise as this game is set in 1579, so yes, maybe it's a newer blade style for the assassins, but I feel like that's me doing the heavy lifting for them. I refuse to have anyone disrespect Connor. That is my tank of a son, and Naoe's blade isn't new to us fans. Let's just get that straight. Anyway, but when I first saw the blade, I effectively went, that's clever to make the hidden blade also Naoe's Tanto blade. Only now to find out she still gets a Tanto blade. So there's that. When using the Tanto Hidden Blade combo, it also unlocks the double assassination. So we have a Hidden Blade that can be shifted into a Tanto, and a Tanto that can be shifted into a Hidden Blade. Anyway, Shadows takes place during the Momoyama period, and during this period, production of Tanto daggers was greatly decreased. What Tantos were forged would have been most likely greatly decorated though. There are different types of Tanto blades, and I'm not going to sit here and try to make an uneducated guess as to which Naoe's is. I don't think that's really important anyways. Next, let's go through Yasuke's weapons. The first one is the long katana, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. It's adjusted so he can use it properly. Next is the naginata. A naginata is a polearm or a long stick with a blade at the end. One of the known users of this weapon were in fact samurais during feudal Japan. So it makes sense for Yasuke to have one. This is also referred to as his crowd control weapon, able to deal damage to multiple enemies surrounding him. Now let's talk about the kanabo. The kanabo literally means metal stick or metal club, and it's exactly that. A war club that is spiked or studded. They could be made out of wood with iron caps, or entirely of iron. These were definitely more so a two-handed weapon. While one-handed ones existed, those tended to go by different names. Next is the weapon I was most excited to talk about, the Yumi bow. When it comes to the Layla trilogy, I focused most of my combat into archery, especially with Origins. That's just fun for me. Plus, the bow can also be used for stealth. So being a fan of the bow, I was excited to see the Yumi bow shown in the article. Since my first language is English, I always knew the Yumi bow to be a specific type of asymmetrical bow. A bow I think is really cool and interesting. The article does give a very short snippet video of Yasuke using the Yumi bow, and though it's a little hard to tell, I'm pretty sure the bow is in fact asymmetrical. Why is this important? Well, it's not really, but as it turns out, Yumi is just the Japanese term for bow. In English, Yumi does refer to the traditional asymmetrical Japanese bow. So I'm assuming the game is referring to the asymmetrical bow as they say Yumi bow. Well, is that like saying naan bread or chai tea then? Still, if that's the case, I'm excited because I love the look of the Yumi. The Yumi was yet another important weapon of the samurai, and seems to be the only bow mentioned, so perhaps more of an Odyssey situation with the only one type of bow. Still, I really hope I can have an archery-based gameplay like I've done before. Last is the Teppo rifle, which I'll briefly go over as best I can. I'm not really a gun person, just not really a fan. From my understanding, Teppo seems to be a shortened name for the rifle, as the word Teppo looks like it just means gun or firearm. So gun rifle. Brilliant. I joke. I can understand trying to make this easier for non-Japanese speakers. Whether or not that's the correct answer is a whole other discussion. From what I can tell, the rifle is actually called Tanegashima Teppo, but Tanegashima seems to be referring to the island in Japan that first purchased and manufactured the gun. For the sake of clarity, I'll just call it a Teppo. Now, the Teppo was introduced to the Japanese by the Portuguese in 1543. Even though the Japanese did overcome a lot of the gun's shortcomings, it still wasn't able to fully replace the Yumi. Also, I did notice in the little videos in the article that when a character exits combat, it plays the same sound effect as Valhalla. Things I find interesting. Now let's get into who will be using all these weapons on. As you can see, there is a wide list of broader enemy types. Even though the descriptors are brief, I think they're pretty well laid out. The article does a good job of explaining each of these enemy types. The Ronin were, yes, masterless samurai, that checks. I do wonder though if the Ronin will function kind of like the Fulakis of Origins or something, just wandering around looking for you. Samurai, obvious. I did spend a little time looking at the Samurai Daisho, and from what I can tell is that Daisho is a Japanese term for matched pair of swords. Though again, the ability to wear these swords seems to have, once again, been limited to the samurai. So the name of these enemies may more so be referring to the fact that they're holding two swords, thus giving them a bit of a unique playstyle. Before moving on though, I'd like to direct your attention to the description of the Guardian, because they are described as an elite group of badass samurai. badass samurai? Oh, yeah, of course. What the hell does that mean? What the hell does that tell me about them? What sort of descriptor is that? Yasuke is a samurai, and by all accounts looks like a badass, so... Who the hell wrote this crap? The rest is just going over some of the moves the enemies can do, and I feel like I've gone a little ham on the combat, so maybe it's best we just move on. One of the things the Assassin's Creed series is known for, stealth. There's a lot to talk about, so let's just get into it. The stealth article immediately reminds us that we have no bird companion in Shadows, which kind of bums me out. I rather liked the birds, but they replaced the birds with an ability both Naoe and Yasuke can do, which is called Observe. And it's literally what the birds did. At least with the birds, it made sense that they could see certain stuff flying around. Like Senu and Ikaros were forms of eagle vision, while Sunin and Enkidu were extensions of eagle vision. Very brief explanation. Still, to see stuff from above, a bird's eye view, makes sense. I'm not sure how sold I am on Observe. I feel like it's just a wait to be released type of thing. It just seems like a bit of an odd move as of right now. But let's get into eagle vision. Eagle vision can only be used by Naoe. Looking at the clip, it seems to be pretty self-explanatory. It's eagle vision. We know it. We love it. Let's move on. In Shadows, the shadows actually matter. Well, you'd hope so with a name like that. It's exciting to see the game play with light and shadows, though. There's also these little ripples coming off of Naoe's feet to let you know how much sound she's making. And to sidebar for a quick moment on the subject of sound, if I remember right, at some point during the marketing, they said this is the first Assassin's Creed game to play with sound as a part of stealth, which isn't true. If you hear people perpetuating this, feel free to actually them, and tell them that no, it was Mirage. I am in love with Mirage, clearly, so I will always come out swinging for it and my beautiful Basim. So yes, Mirage played with sound first, with things like noisemakers and Basim's landing. His Hidden One robes can be upgraded so he creates less noise. Even opening things like bags to loot from make a sound that the guards will turn around and notice. Mirage deserves love, but if Shadows is going to expand and flesh out the sound use more, sign me up. I'm here for it. Though, maybe you could make the argument that Assassin's Creed has been playing with sound since they added in whistling. As a part of Naoe's stealth, she can't go prone. Well, so can Yasuke too, it says, but I think I've only ever seen footage of Naoe doing it so far. But going prone is when she flattens herself on the ground and crawls around. When Naoe goes prone though, it offers her a new moveset, like if you press the dodge button while prone, it lets her roll to the side. A very cool extension to sneaking around. What are the tools at Naoe's disposal? Well, Naoe has the classic smoke bomb. Though nothing will ever beat the smoke bombs in Mirage. I really liked the vibrant red smoke. It was such a vibe. Another tool is called Shinobi Bells, which seem like they're going to work like the noisemakers. They make noise to draw guards away. The next two I feel like don't need much explanation if you watch a lot of anime. That's a joke. That was a joke. Kunai are throwing knives. Not much more to say on that. We know how throwing knives work. Then there's shuriken, which are a star-shaped throwing weapon, which on first glance may sound like they function similarly to the kunai, but it looks like they are meant more for stunning enemies or causing distractions. We've already talked about double assassinations, so next is grabbing enemies. Grabbing enemies and pulling them into bushes is no longer automated. Instead, when procced, you have to manually drag your enemies into bushes to knock out, or end. Enemies are going to get a little more complicated, it seems. First, it looks like there is a new type of enemy, charmingly referred to as servants, which has historical accounts, sure, but I don't know. Feels a little odd saying it. But the servants are basically walking alarms, able to alert soldiers if you're spotted. It looks like the devs are really trying to make the NPCs as real and reactionary as possible. If you're stealthing and then get detected, then disappear again, there will be NPCs searching for you in pairs, a watcher and a seeker, and they'll remember you, so if you whistle, they'll be more suspicious than they were before. This mechanic of NPCs remembering you seems to be more fleshed out than it was in Mirage, and it was already good there. In Mirage, guards would remember you if they saw you. If an NPC civilian saw you doing a crime, they'd tell guards, or if they saw where you hid, they'll try to point you out to guards. The article then explains more how enemy samurais work, and how they won't be easily tricked, to the point where you can't use a smoke bomb on them to end them. Instead, the samurai will just disperse from the smoke. So that'll be fun to play around with. What comes next is going to be controversial, I guess we could say. Assassination denied. It looks like Shadows is going to be sort of RPG adjacent, just like the Layla trilogy. Though, Assassin's Creed has been RPG adjacent since Unity. That's when we first saw RPG type elements appear. Well, then again, the in-game economy introduced in Assassin's Creed 2 was inspired by RPG games as well. So since Assassin's Creed 2? Well, anyway. Enemies in Shadows are going to be leveled based on their archetype and region, meaning we'll probably have some sort of leveling system. I don't mind the leveling system. I don't think most normal players do. But there is a reoccurring complaint I see with people who love the Layla trilogy like I do. That complaint being that the Hidden Blade doesn't automatically do a one-shot kill, which honestly I understand. Throughout the series, the Hidden Blade has been the one faithful weapon that guarantees you that kill. But when that changed, I mean, I can understand the dislike. I myself don't think it's the worst thing to change, but I do prefer the Hidden Blade as a one-shot, but perhaps that's just my nostalgia. I honestly think Valhalla had a really fair balance for this. When Eivor would go to assassinate a higher level enemy, you would be prompted with a small quicktime event. When timed right, you'd get that one-shot kill. I like this because it adds background storytelling while also allowing the Hidden Blade to do what it's known for. Eivor was new to her Hidden Blade, so being 100% proficient with it would take some time perfecting. That quicktime event felt like you were learning it with her in a way. Back to Shadows though, it feels like every beat of engaging with enemies is meant to be a puzzle now. And in combat that's fun, but when it comes to the Hidden Blade, I don't know. I'm just glad you can go into the menu and turn on the option to insta-kill enemies. Does knowing that leave this section a little pointless? I don't think so. For me, it feels like Shadows has a lot going on, and that can be a little overwhelming. So having the option to turn on insta-kills for the Hidden Blade is very tempting. Lastly, we get to look at what Stealth Yasuke can do, and it's bow. It is just him using a bow. Which, sure, but this is just funny to me for some reason. But you can still perform assassinations with Yasuke and still find a way to stealth with him. Which leaves me very curious about how well you can stealth with him. Did anyone see those posts back when Assassin's Creed Infinity was first being circled around the internet? And like, for some reason, people thought that Assassin's Creed was going to become a first-person shooter or like Fortnite or something. I honestly don't know how well those ideas circled around the internet. I probably just sound crazy to you, but trust me, they were real. People were in this weird, jaded state about Infinity that I didn't understand. Being a longtime fan of the series, my theory was that Infinity was going to be an Animus hub, something like the idea at the very, very beginning of Unity. You know, some of these settings I'd still like to see, by the way. That's getting off track. I figured it would be something along these lines, and I was sort of rolling my eyes at the more crazy theories people had, or them like freaking out that this was going to be the end of Assassin's Creed. Well, guess who was right? I have no proof, but in my heart I know I was right, and that is enough for me. Of course, now that it's revealed to be a hub, I've been seeing people saying it's underwhelming. There is no winning. Well, anyway, Ubisoft has put out an article going over the hub. Of course, it's not everything, but it's enough to answer some questions. I've personally been avoiding watching videos on the hub, so I can experience it in full when I get my hands on Shadows. I like experiencing new Assassin's Creed games for myself in full. It's why I tend to look at only things Ubisoft has put out, and maybe this will help explain why I'm only going through articles and a trailer. Anyway, let's get into it. The hub is themed to be an Animus, as all the menus usually are in the series. Let's just get into the meat of it. Now, the hub is not a standalone launcher like Uplay, so it's available on all versions of Shadows.
Even though the Animus Hub isn't a launcher, it can still launch games. So a little confusing. The hub just gives you access to your Period 2 titles. So that's the name we're going with for Origins onward. Period 2. Well, I guess that makes sense. Otherwise things might become a bit of a mouthful. The Animus Hub has access to the Layla Trilogy, Mirage, and Shadows. Well, Period 2 makes sense, meaning that Syndicate and those before it are known as Period 1. And then everyone goes, no duh, Eivor. Right now, Period 1 games are not supported on the hub, but with the way the article is phrased, it might be something we see in the future. After all, the hub is meant to be ever-expanding and ever-evolving. Though, speaking of this segment of the hub, I know I said I personally didn't watch gamer videos or watch too much gameplay, but I did see a screenshot of the hub of the Valhalla launcher or whatever you want to call it, and just... for some reason in the hub, they show Javi instead of Eivor. So we can acknowledge that Cassandra is the canon character for Odyssey. That's no problem. But gods forbid we acknowledge the canon woman character in the Norse game. Might ruin certain men's Viking fantasies or something. I'm so tired. I just hope that's fixed before release. The hub also has its own missions. What those missions are is unclear, but these missions are accessed by finding anomalies. The modern day story also plays a role in the hub. There's a mention of a hacked Dark Animus that plays into the modern day story as well, but it's not just in the hub where there is a modern day story. Shadows will still have a modern day story, which is exciting. Now we have Basim as a modern day protagonist, and me being the biggest Basim fan, I am just so... Wait, what's that? Basim isn't a part of the modern day story.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Okay, cool. Sad? I'm not sad. Though this does bring up the question of Mirage. Mirage in the grand story of Assassin's Creed was William Miles learning that he could trust Basim as an assassin. So that's it? That's just where that stops? Basim had a modern day story about to unfold. He had ambitions. The modern story was getting back on track to go somewhere with Layla and then Basim coming in. Eivor, you're just biased because it's Basim. Yes. And my point still stands. Don't look at me like that. What's even next? Oh, how about some good news? Nothing in the hub costs real-world money. It's all free. There will be rewards to earn just by simply playing the game. Any future missions and content updates will be free, which is really cool. In all honesty, even from what little I've seen of the hub, I'm genuinely interested in the direction they're taking things. I love how we have this Animus to ourselves in a way. I'm still curious about the direction the modern day story is going and how that'll play through the hub. It's such an interesting way to tell a story. I'm getting like Revelations vibes with this. I don't know if any videos have revealed anything about who is running the hub, but it's giving major Abstergo energy. Again, that whole intro segment to Unity comes to mind. It does feel like they took that idea and like ran with it, and I'm excited to come through it myself upon release. The ending of the article gives this eerie message of, follow the trail, and we'll be in touch. Is this going to be some continuation of the Initiate modern-day storyline? That line is very assassin-like to me, but who knows. I am here for the hub. As someone who was well prepared for this being what Infinity actually would be, I'm very intrigued in what this means for the story and lore. So while the story trailer that Ubisoft dropped didn't tell us a lot, and we're gonna have to wait for the full story, I still want to take some time to maybe pull out some interesting things that we could possibly look forward to. The first thing of note to me is, well, something that causes me to raise my eyebrow. Naoya is told by, I'm assuming her father, to explain a dream she's had. By the way the trailer phrases things, it seemingly alludes to a premonition type dream, which would be odd. Dream sequences are always explained. Desmond has a bleeding effect. Connor encounters the crystal ball Isu artifact. Arno takes absinthe. Bayek takes a hallucinogenic mix to yet again have a nightmare he's been having about his soul. That's all just a very brief explanation, of course. But I mean, even with Eivor's premonition dream at the beginning of Valhalla, it's found out to be a memory of her past life masquerading as a premonition. I mean, all her dreams are memories being revealed under the guise of religious dreams. But this is going to be my most nitpicky point, and it's something that doesn't have an answer yet. Just something in the trailer I found kind of odd, but I really do hope there's more of an explanation for it in the game. I am curious as to why Naoe's dad specifically says that the hidden blade can't be taken. I want to know what story importance the blade has because even Yasuke recognizes it. Saying how Naoe is a part of something bigger than this war and that their fates are connected. I get sort of like an Assassin's Creed 2 vibe from the way the trailer shows the story. This idea of Naoe picking up a hidden blade, not knowing the gravity of it all, setting off for vengeance, then getting tangled up in something so much bigger than her personal quest. We do in fact see a Templar cross, but the clothes the Templar wears looks far more European-like in style. I believe Yasuke was brought to Japan on a Portuguese ship. I wonder if that assassin we see is on the Portuguese ship, trying to get to said Templar. I mean, we see a leg behind the assassin, and the clothing on the leg doesn't really look Japanese. I think the guy we see shooting a gun is our Templar, the wardrobe, the ship, it's not very subtle. Other than that, we see flashes of side characters that I'm not going to even try to make guesses about. The story trailer doesn't say a lot, but it gets the excitement going, so it did its job. So, keeping in mind that I'm mostly avoiding gameplay videos for my own future enjoyment, what are some things I'd like to see in Shadows? Well, there was one thing in Shadows I really wanted to see, but that got ripped away from me. Yes, the whole Basim modern-day protagonist thing. I'm sorry, it just was the one thing I really wanted. But with that gone, and after looking through articles and information, we can get into other things a longtime Assassin's Creed fan would like to see in the next mainline title. Well, honestly, I just hope it captures that feeling all the other Assassin's Creed games give me. I want to see that challenging of morals, who is right and who is wrong. I want the game to play with that area of gray that past titles have done, but in its own way, of course. The story already seems like it's going in a good direction for that, and I really hope we see Naoe and Yasuke challenge each other in their beliefs. I hope I enjoy getting lost in the setting, getting lost traveling the map and discovering everything. I honestly don't even really know what to say for this part because every time a new Assassin's Creed game comes out, I just trust it'll be good, or at least good to me. My hope is just that I'll enjoy it, and honestly, nothing really has changed. Though, if the combat is similar to Valhalla's, I would not complain. If you've made it this far into the video, then congratulations! You've been duped into hearing me rant. Oh, okay, joking. Kind of. I think the so-called drama around Shadows is important to talk about. In my first video, I spent time calling out the racist remarks being made, and explaining how Yasuke is in fact a samurai, and that I believed samurais were being conflated with knights, which I thought might have been the reasoning as to why people didn't understand that Adamyo's retainer is still a samurai. I had a lot more information in that first video, but I felt that a mention here was warranted. In that first video, I did mention how my next video was going to be a video of me talking about the drama with Shadows, and I started working on a script. I think I even started it over once. But the sewage stream was never ending, so I pivoted to make my Mirage video. Plus, I wanted to do a video on the most recent Assassin's Creed game before Shadows came out. Then Shadows got delayed, and then delayed again, and this for some reason has sparked outrage, in the needless drama variety. Think about when other games get delayed. I think about companies like Nintendo or CDPR delaying games, and people's usual responses are, I'm glad the devs are getting more time to work on the games, and they aren't just rushing it out. Which, yeah, it's a fair response. I think we should be advocating for games to be delayed if they need to be, especially if the devs can avoid crunch by doing so. I'm always going to advocate for developers to have better working conditions. Oh, but what happens when Shadows gets delayed? Well, if you're me, you're thinking, oh, they need time to polish the game? I'm glad the devs are getting time to polish the game more to a point where they're happy with it. I'm sure there's still crunch, but if we're lucky, maybe the delays will alleviate it by at least a little. Which is fair, right? Okay, so how did the vocal internet at large respond? They absolutely shit the bed. This couldn't be worse for Shadows. Suddenly, this was a bad sign for the game. To which I ask, how do gamers pick and choose what delays are good for a game and which aren't? I remember when Cyberpunk was delayed before release, like multiple times, and I very much remember people praising CDPR for delaying the game and allowing the devs to work on it more. I personally had no interest in Cyberpunk, and I was hearing this. I just don't understand how that's good, but Shadows needing more time for polish is just awful and should have never happened. My only guess really is people are just trying to make bad press for Shadows, because doing so seems to be easy clicks. Oh, speaking of Shadows getting delayed, there was this weird rumor floating around at one point that the game got delayed because they were removing Yasuke from it. And that was like one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Hear me out. So the devs spend years building the game around two protagonists, and you think the devs can just remove one of the protagonists and rebuild or whatever, huge parts of the game in a couple of months. Like, the devs are good, but at what point do you just hit delusions? Yes, the racist petition failed, and Yasuke is still in the game. They were never going to remove him. I don't know how this idea spread. Well, to be fair, I don't know how any of these ideas ever spread. I don't even think I'm that online, but somehow I run into a lot of gamer ideals. Oh, one of the newer ones I've seen other channels jump onto is voice acting. Twice now, I've seen videos about Assassin's Creed voice acting and how it's evolving backwards, or whatever. And for some reason, both times, the newer games were just compared to Cesare's performance. Like, yeah, Cesare is a wildly different character than Basim. Cesare is bombastic and over the top, and it works for him. But to say Lee Majdoub was bad? Did we even play the same game? He was phenomenal as Basim. The fight with Roshan alone, the way you can hear his voice crack, like he's on the verge of tears, it kills me every time. I even love the way he tries to mimic Carlo Rota's performance as Basim at the end of Mirage, and he's not that bad at it. Sorry, I'm going off about Basim again. I have a reason for bringing this up. I bring it up because the newest thumbnail I saw in this category had both Cesare and freaking Naue on it. Shadows isn't even out yet. How? How can you judge Masumi's performance as Naue before the game is even out? We haven't even heard a lot of lines from her. Side note on this topic, but how can you say the voice acting is evolving backwards when we have Abu Bakr Salim as Bayek of Siwa? You just play the opening of Origins, my favorite game, and tell me that's evolving backwards. I dare you. I would just love it if someone could sit me down and tell me how gamers decide when to be blinded by nostalgia or when they decide to put on the rose-tinted glasses. And I know, I'm just going off on a weird tangent about the fan base of Assassin's Creed, but I mean, my first video on this channel was all about that, and that seemed to do pretty well. I just find a lot of dumb stuff on the internet, and it does feel sort of cathartic to put it into a video and just kind of see how many people relate to my experiences. This has all been a very elaborate way to say that all this drama around Shadows is just nothing. There really isn't any drama, and in fact, well, actually, there is one thing. It's something I haven't seen anyone talk about, and something I have personal experience with, so if I may. Why did Ubisoft do a deal to only have the collector's edition of Shadows at GameStop? I mean, at first it was frustrating enough as a PC player to find out that the collector's edition was only for console players. I have someone taking the physical game, don't worry, but then the other day, as I go to put more money down on my pre-order, tell me why the GameStop was closed. Like, gone. Out of business type closed. I had not even received an email or call from GameStop about anything regarding my pre-order. Just nothing. I had to go to the next closest GameStop to learn that 400 GameStop locations had closed after the holidays, suddenly, without even warning the people who were working in these locations. To which, GameStop, what the hell is wrong with you? I don't like GameStop. I'm only going there to get the collector's edition for Shadows because we as people need to get joy wherever we can. But like, on top of innocent people losing their jobs suddenly, which is messed up, I am curious to know how many people were just in the same boat as me. Suddenly, the GameStop with their pre-order is gone, and they also just weren't given any word as to where it went. I do very much realize this is like first world problem stuff, but if you want to talk about drama around Shadows, this is the drama. Ubisoft, just go back to selling the collector's editions yourselves. I don't know why you decided to switch it up this time around. And oh, yes, I did find where my pre-order was. The guy at the GameStop I went to was very helpful, and I was able to find my collector's edition because of him. So that's the end of that story. Look, there's been a lot of nasty stuff said online about Shadows, about Yasuke especially, but the racist weirdos you see are just a minority. A very loud and annoying minority, but still. There have been those making fun of these weirdos, and rightfully dunking on them. We love to see it. But that's all these gamers are. They're just weirdos, little freaks who are lost in their messed up worldview. I only say all this because I don't want anyone to be deterred from playing Shadows, especially when I know Japan has been long requested by fans of the Assassin's Creed series. I personally know people who are super excited for Shadows, and honestly, the more stuff I see about Shadows, the more my bias against the setting just kind of fades away and the more excited I become. So let's be excited. Let's look forward to Shadows unapologetically. And for those who are interested in playing Shadows, I'll be here with you when the game is released. I'm sure my next video will be my first impressions of Shadows, so until then... Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed your stay at the Bureau, and I hope I'll see you around for the next one. Safety and peace.